This is Mao Zedong, the man who transformed China and left a lasting impact on the world. Rising from a rural upbringing to become the leader of the Chinese Communist Party, Mao's journey is filled with dramatic twists, monumental decisions, and shocking controversies. Did you know he launched the Great Leap Forward, which aimed to rapidly industrialize China, but led to one of the deadliest famines in history? Or that during the Cultural Revolution, he mobilized millions of young people known as Red Guards to reshape Chinese society? Stay with us to uncover the fascinating and tumultuous life of Mao Zedong, a figure whose legacy continues to shape China today. Mao Zedong was born on December 26, 1893, in the rural village of Shaoshan, located in Xiangtan County, Hunan Province. His family belonged to the peasant class, but they were relatively prosperous compared to their neighbors. Mao's father, Mao Yichang, was an industrious and stern man who rose from the status of a poor peasant to a wealthy grain merchant through sheer hard work and thriftiness. Yichang was known for his strict and sometimes harsh parenting style, which left a lasting impression on young boy. His mother, Wen Shimei, was in many ways the opposite of her husband. She was a gentle and devout Buddhist who exerted a calming and nurturing influence on Mao. Her Buddhist beliefs and compassionate nature provided a stark contrast to his father's authoritarian demeanor. He had three siblings, two younger brothers, Mao Zemin and Mao Zedong, and an adopted sister, Mao Zedong. The family dynamics were complex, with Mao often caught between his father's rigorous expectations and his mother's softer guidance. Despite the tension between his parents, his early years were marked by a deep bond with his mother. Wen Shimei's devout spirituality and kindness left an indelible mark on Mao, instilling in him a sense of empathy that would later manifest in his revolutionary zeal to uplift the oppressed peasantry. However, his father's business acumen and relentless discipline also shaped his, giving him a keen understanding of rural economics and the plight of the Chinese peasantry. Mao's education began in the village school, where he was introduced to the classical Chinese curriculum based on Confucian texts. However, he soon found this education system rigid and out of touch with the rapidly changing world outside his village. In 1909, at the age of 16, he left home to attend a modern school in the county seat of Jiangshang. This school, unlike traditional Confucian academies, exposed him to contemporary subjects and revolutionary ideas. During his time in Jiangshang, he was particularly influenced by the writings of Kang Yu-wei and Liang Qichao, reformers who advocated for the modernization of China. These ideas resonated with Mao, who became increasingly disillusioned with the Qing dynasty's inability to protect China from foreign domination and internal decay. In 1911, inspired by the revolutionary fervor sweeping through China, he participated in the Xinhai Revolution, which led to the overthrow of the Qing dynasty and the establishment of the Republic of China. Following the revolution, Mao continued his studies at the Hunan First Normal School in Changsha, the provincial capital. Here he was exposed to a wider array of political ideologies, including anarchism, liberalism, and socialism. It was during this period that he first encountered Marxist literature, which provided a theoretical framework that aligned with his growing belief in the necessity of revolutionary change. He read avidly, absorbing the works of Karl Marx, Friedrich Engels, and other socialist thinkers, and began to form his own revolutionary ideas. Mao's move to Beijing in 1918 marked a significant turning point in his life. He secured a job as a library assistant at Peking University, a position that placed him at the heart of intellectual and political ferment. At the university, he met several key figures in the emerging communist movement, including Li Dezhou and Chen Duxiu, who would later become founding members of the Chinese Communist Party, CCP. His time in Beijing was intellectually stimulating and politically transformative. He immersed himself in the study of Marxism, attended lectures and discussions, and began to formulate his own revolutionary ideas. He was particularly impressed by Li Dezhao's emphasis on the peasantry's role in the revolution, an idea that would later become a cornerstone of Mao's revolutionary strategy. In 1920, he returned to Hunan, where he began to organize workers and peasants, laying the groundwork for a broad-based revolutionary movement. In July 1921, Mao attended the first Congress of the CCP in Shanghai, where he was elected as one of the party's first members. This marked the beginning of his formal involvement in the communist movement. Over the next few years, he worked tirelessly to build the party's base among workers and peasants, organizing strikes and uprisings and establishing party cells in rural areas. His efforts to mobilize the rural population were met with fierce resistance from local landlords and warlords. But he persisted, convinced that the peasantry held the key to China's revolutionary future. During the early 1920s, Mao focused on organizing labor strikes and building the CCP's influence among urban workers. In 1922, he traveled to Hunan to establish a provincial branch of the CCP and quickly became involved in organizing peasant associations. He believed that the rural population, particularly the poor peasants, would be the most reliable base of support for the communist revolution. His time in Hunan was marked by extensive travels through the countryside, during which he conducted surveys and gathered data on rural conditions, reinforcing his conviction that the peasantry was essential to the revolutionary movement. Mao's activities in Hunan attracted the attention of the CCP leadership, and in 1923, he was elected to the party's Central Committee. This recognition allowed him to expand his efforts to organize peasants on a national scale. He published articles and pamphlets advocating for peasant rights and land reform, gaining a reputation as a leading advocate for rural revolution. In 1925, he played a key role in the May 30th movement, a series of anti-imperialist and labor protests that erupted in major Chinese cities, further establishing his prominence within the party. The late 1920s were a period of significant upheaval for the CCP. In 1927, Chiang Kai-shek, the leader of the Kuomintang, KMT, launched a violent purge of communists in what became known as the White Terror. Thousands of communists and their sympathizers were arrested and executed, forcing the CCP to retreat into the countryside. This period of intense repression solidified Mao's belief in the importance of guerrilla warfare in rural bases for the survival and success of the communist movement. In the wake of the White Terror, he moved to the Jinggangshan region, a remote mountainous area in southeastern China, where he established a revolutionary base. Here he developed the strategies of guerrilla warfare and rural mobilization that would become central to his revolutionary theory. His leadership in Jinggangshan was marked by efforts to build alliances with local bandits and warlords, integrate them into the Red Army, and implement land reforms to win the support of the peasantry. These efforts laid the foundation for the CCP's future successes in rural mobilization and guerrilla warfare. The early 1930s were a period of intense conflict between the CCP and the ruling Kuomintang, KMT, led by Chiang Kai-shek. The KMT's relentless campaigns against the communists forced the CCP to undertake the Long March, a strategic retreat across China that began in October 1934. The Long March was a grueling journey that covered over 9,000 kilometers, 5,600 miles, and lasted more than a year. It tested the endurance, resilience, and leadership of the communist forces. Mao emerged as a key leader during the Long March, demonstrating remarkable strategic acumen and earning the loyalty and respect of his comrades. Despite suffering heavy casualties and enduring extreme hardships, the communists managed to evade the KMT forces and reach the relative safety of Shanxi province in northwestern China. The Long March was not only a military retreat, but also a journey of ideological consolidation and leadership realignment. His leadership during this period solidified his position as the paramount leader of the CCP. The Long March had a profound impact on Mao's leadership style and revolutionary strategy. It reinforced his belief in the importance of guerrilla warfare, rural bases, and the mobilization of the peasantry. The experience also instilled in him a sense of mission and destiny, as he and his followers came to see themselves as the vanguard of a new China. The Long March became a symbol of the CCP's determination, resilience, and commitment to the revolutionary cause, and it played a crucial role in shaping the party's identity and mythology. After the Long March, Mao focused on rebuilding the CCP and consolidating his leadership. He established a base in Yan'an, where he developed his strategies for guerrilla warfare and rural revolution. During the Second Sino-Japanese War, 1937 to 1945, his forces grew stronger as they expanded their base areas and built a broad coalition of support among the peasantry. The war provided an opportunity to demonstrate his leadership and military skills, as well as to expand the CCP's influence and control. By the end of World War II, the CCP was poised to challenge the KMT for control of China. The ensuing civil war between the communists and the nationalists was brutal and protracted, but the CCP gradually gained the upper hand. Mao's strategy of encircling the cities from the countryside proved effective, as the communists systematically defeated the KMT forces and took control of key regions. In 1949, after years of fierce fighting, the CCP emerged victorious, and on October 1st, he proclaimed the establishment of the People's Republic of China, PRC, in Tiananmen Square. The establishment of the PRC marked the culmination of his revolutionary efforts and the beginning of a new era in Chinese history. Mao's vision for China was rooted in Marxism-Leninism, but he adapted these ideas to fit the unique conditions of Chinese society. He emphasized the importance of the peasantry in the revolutionary struggle, a departure from the orthodox Marxist focus on the urban proletariat. His policies aimed to rapidly transform China into a socialist society through land reforms, collectivization of agriculture, and the nationalization of industry. These policies were implemented with brutal force, resulting in significant social upheaval and widespread suffering. Mao's ideological framework was deeply influenced by Marxism-Leninism, but he also incorporated elements from traditional Chinese thought in his own revolutionary experiences. He developed a distinctive version of Marxism, often referred to as Maoism, which emphasized the role of the peasantry in the revolutionary struggle and the importance of guerrilla warfare. He believed that the rural population, rather than the urban proletariat, would be the driving force behind the revolution in China. One of his earliest policies after establishing the PRC was land reform. This involved the redistribution of land from wealthy landlords to poor peasants, a move aimed at breaking the power of the traditional landowning class and gaining the support of the rural population. The land reform campaign was implemented with brutal force, resulting in the execution of thousands of landlords and significant social upheaval. While it succeeded in redistributing land and reducing rural poverty, it also created lasting resentment and division within Chinese society. Mao's economic policies aimed to rapidly industrialize China and transform it into a socialist state. In 1953, he launched the first five-year plan, which focused on developing heavy industry and collectivizing agriculture. The plan achieved some initial success in boosting industrial production, but it also created significant challenges, including food shortages and inefficiencies in the agricultural sector. His determination to accelerate the pace of industrialization led to the launch of the Great Leap Forward in 1958, an ambitious campaign aimed at transforming China into a major industrial power. The Great Leap Forward was one of Mao's most ambitious and controversial policies. Announced in 1958, the campaign aimed to rapidly industrialize China and collectivize its agricultural sector through mass mobilization and the creation of people's communes. He believed that the collective effort of the Chinese people could achieve miraculous economic growth and propel China into a leading global power. However, the IT proved to be a catastrophic failure. The policies implemented during the campaign disrupted agricultural production, leading to a massive famine that resulted in the deaths of an estimated 15 to 45 million people. The focus on rapid industrialization led to the diversion of labor from farming to industrial projects, causing widespread food shortages. The communal farming system, which was intended to increase efficiency, instead led to mismanagement and decreased productivity. The reform had devastating consequences for Chinese society. The famine caused immense suffering and loss of life, particularly in rural areas. The social and economic disruption caused by the campaign undermined public trust in the government and created lasting scars in Chinese society. Mao's insistence on continuing the campaign, despite clear evidence of its failure, demonstrated his ruthless determination and willingness to sacrifice human lives for his revolutionary goals. In the wake of the Great Leap Forward, Mao Zedong faced significant criticism within the Chinese Communist Party, CCP. The disastrous economic and social consequences of the Great Leap Forward had severely damaged his reputation and weakened his authority. Despite these setbacks, he managed to retain his position of power within the party. Determined to reassert his control and eliminate any elements he considered counter-revolutionary, he launched the Cultural Revolution in 1966. This campaign was aimed at radically reshaping Chinese society and eradicating remnants of the old social order, which he viewed as obstacles to the realization of a true communist state. The Cultural Revolution officially began in May 1966, when Mao and his close allies, including his wife Jiang Qing, issued a directive to launch a nationwide campaign against revisionists within the CCP and broader Chinese society. This initiative was intended to preserve the ideological purity of communism by rooting out any influences that deviated from Maoist thought. The campaign quickly gained momentum, fueled by his charismatic leadership and the fervent support of his followers. A key component of the Cultural Revolution was the mobilization of millions of young people, who became known as the Red Guards. These youths were encouraged to actively participate in the revolution by identifying and attacking perceived enemies of Maoist ideology. The Red Guards targeted intellectuals, party officials, and ordinary citizens who were accused of harboring bourgeois tendencies or counter-revolutionary thoughts. The movement was characterized by intense fervor and a zealous commitment to his vision, leading to widespread violence and social upheaval. One of the first targets was the education system. Schools and universities across China were closed, and students were encouraged to abandon their studies to join the revolutionary cause. Academic curricula were overhauled to align with Maoist principles, and traditional educational practices were denounced as elitist and counter-revolutionary. Teachers and professors were subjected to public humiliation, denunciation sessions, and physical violence, as the Red Guards sought to eradicate any vestiges of the old intellectual order. The plan also sought to eliminate traditional cultural practices and historical heritage, which were seen as symbols of China's feudal past. Historical sites, temples, and monuments were destroyed, and cultural artifacts were burned or defaced. This campaign of cultural destruction was driven by the belief that a complete break with the past was necessary to achieve true revolutionary transformation. The Red Guards took particular aim at the four olds: old customs, old culture, old habits, and old ideas, which they sought to eradicate from Chinese society. As the Cultural Revolution progressed, it created a climate of fear and suspicion throughout China. People were encouraged to denounce their colleagues, neighbors, and even family members, leading to a pervasive atmosphere of mistrust. Accusations of counter-revolutionary behavior could result in severe punishment, including imprisonment, torture, and execution. The widespread persecution and violence led to the deaths of an estimated 1.5 to 2 million people and caused immense suffering for countless others. The political purges initiated during the revolution extended to the highest levels of the CCP. Prominent party leaders, including President Liu Shaoqi and Deng Xiaoping, were accused of being counter-revolutionaries and were removed from their positions. Liu Shaoqi, who had been considered a potential successor to Mao, was subjected to brutal treatment and died in prison in 1969. Deng Xiaoping was stripped of his post and sent to work in a rural tractor factory, though he would later return to power after his death. Mentioned events also had significant economic consequences: the disruption of education, the persecution of skilled professionals, and the general climate of chaos severely impacted industrial and agricultural production. Many factories and farms were mismanaged or abandoned as workers and managers were caught up in the revolutionary fervor. The economy suffered from declining productivity, and shortages of basic goods became common. Despite its destructive impact, the Cultural Revolution succeeded in consolidating Mao's control over the party and the state. By purging his rivals and instilling a sense of ideological purity, he was able to reassert his authority and promote a radical vision of socialism that emphasized egalitarianism and mass mobilization. It reinforced his cult of personality, as his image and writings were elevated to near-sacred status. The Little Red Book, a collection of Mao's quotations, became a central text for millions of Chinese citizens and symbolized their commitment to his revolutionary ideals. It remains a highly controversial and sensitive topic in China. Official narratives acknowledge the excesses and mistakes of the period, but public discussion is often limited by government censorship. The campaign is remembered as a time of intense upheaval and suffering, but also as a pivotal moment in China's revolutionary history. His role in the revolution continues to be debated, with some viewing him as a visionary leader who sought to purify the revolution, while others see him as a tyrant whose policies caused untold harm. Mao's personal life was complex and often tumultuous. He was married 4 times, and his relationships with his wives and children were often strained. His first wife, Luo Yishu, whom he married at the age of 14, died shortly after their marriage. This arranged marriage, which was customary at the time, had little impact on his life and left him largely unaffected emotionally. Mao's second wife, Yang Kai-hui, was an active communist who played a significant role in his early revolutionary activities. They married in 1920 and had 3 children together. Yang Kai-hui's execution by the KMT in 1930 was a profound personal loss for him and strengthened his resolve to continue the revolutionary struggle. His third marriage, to He Zizhen, produced several children but ended in separation due to political and personal differences. He Zizhen was a committed revolutionary who accompanied him during the Long March, but their relationship deteriorated over time. Mao's fourth and final wife, Jiang Tung, was a former actress who became a prominent political figure during the Cultural Revolution. Jiang Tung played a key role in promoting his radical policies and was a leading figure in the Gang of Four, a political faction that wielded significant power during the Cultural Revolution. His relationship with Jiang Tung was complex and often strained, but she remained loyal to him until his death. Mao's relationships with his children were also complicated. He had several sons and daughters, but his political commitments often took precedence over his family life. His eldest son, Mao Anying, died during the Korean War, a loss that deeply affected him. Despite his many personal and political challenges, he remained a dominant figure in Chinese politics until his death. Mao's relationships with other communist leaders were often marked by tension and rivalry. He had a complicated relationship with Joseph Stalin, the leader of the Soviet Union, and their interactions were characterized by mutual distrust. He admired Stalin's revolutionary achievements, but was also wary of Soviet dominance and interference in Chinese affairs. The two leaders had several contentious meetings, and he often felt that Stalin did not fully support the Chinese Revolution. After Stalin's death in 1953, Mao's relationship with Stalin's successor, Nikita Khrushchev, deteriorated further. He viewed Khrushchev's policies of de-Stalinization and peaceful coexistence with the West as a betrayal of revolutionary principles. The ideological and political differences between the two leaders led to the Sino-Soviet split in the early 1960s, a significant rift within the global communist movement. The split had far-reaching implications for international relations, as China sought to position itself as an independent revolutionary power. Despite these challenges, he managed to establish diplomatic relations with several countries. In 1972, he met with U.S. President Richard Nixon in a historic visit that marked the beginning of a thaw in Sino-American relations. The rapprochement was driven by mutual strategic interests, as both countries sought to counterbalance the influence of the Soviet Union. His willingness to engage with the United States demonstrated his pragmatic approach to foreign policy and his desire to elevate China's status on the global stage. Mao's foreign policy was driven by his desire to position China as a leader of the global revolutionary movement. He sought to build alliances with other socialist countries and anti-imperialist movements around the world. However, his relationships with other countries were often fraught with tension and conflict. The Sino-Soviet split created a significant rift within the communist bloc, and Mao's support for revolutionary movements in Southeast Asia and Africa often put him at odds with both the Soviet Union and the United States. He provided support to communist insurgencies in countries such as Vietnam, Laos, and Cambodia, as well as to liberation movements in Africa and Latin America. These actions reflected his commitment to spreading the revolution and challenging imperialist powers. The Chinese leader also sought to build alliances with other developing countries in the non-aligned movement, which sought to remain independent of the influence of both the Western and Eastern blocs during the Cold War. He positioned China as a champion of anti-imperialist struggles and provided support to various liberation movements around the world. This approach helped to enhance China's influence in the developing world and align it with countries seeking to assert their independence from colonial and neocolonial powers. Mao had a range of personal interests and behaviors that were often at odds with his public persona. He was an avid reader and had a deep interest in classical Chinese literature and philosophy. Throughout his life, he wrote poetry, essays, and political treatises, demonstrating his literary talent and intellectual curiosity. His works, including his famous quotations from Chairman Mao Zedong, commonly known as the Little Red Book, became influential texts within the communist movement. He also enjoyed physical activities and was known for his love of swimming. He often used swimming as a way to demonstrate his vitality and strength, even in his later years. His famous swims in the Yangtze River were highly publicized events that showcased his physical prowess and symbolized his connection to the Chinese people. His affinity for swimming also reflected his belief in the importance of physical fitness and endurance, qualities he admired in both himself and his followers. Despite his ascetic public image, Mao led a relatively luxurious lifestyle. He resided in several well-appointed residences, including Zhongnanhai, a government complex in Beijing, and his private villa in the hills of Wuhan. He had a particular fondness for fine food and personal indulgences, which stood in contrast to the austere lifestyle he promoted for the masses. His personal chef often prepared elaborate meals that catered to his specific tastes, and he enjoyed the company of young women who were part of his inner circle. His personal habits and behaviors were sometimes controversial and contradictory. He was known for his irregular sleeping patterns, often staying up late into the night to read and write. He also had a reputation for being mercurial and demanding, with a volatile temperament that could change rapidly. Despite these idiosyncrasies, He maintained a charismatic and commanding presence that inspired loyalty and devotion among his followers. In the final years of his life, Mao Zedong's physical condition deteriorated significantly. By the early 1970s, his health issues had become more pronounced, exacerbated by decades of heavy smoking, poor dietary habits, and a lack of regular medical care. He suffered from a range of ailments, including chronic lung infections, heart disease, and symptoms consistent with Parkinson's disease, which impaired his movement and speech. Despite his declining health, he remained a central figure in Chinese politics, insisting on being informed about and involved in major decisions. As Mao's condition worsened, he spent increasing amounts of time in seclusion, primarily in his residential compound in Zhongnanhai, Beijing, as well as other residences he favored for their privacy and comfort. His daily routine became more sedentary, with long periods of rest and medical treatment administered by a team of physicians who monitored his condition closely. His seclusion was not only due to his frailty, but also a result of the factional struggles within the Communist Party, which had intensified as his health declined. Mao's interactions with the outside world became increasingly limited. However, he continued to meet with key party leaders and select foreign dignitaries, determined to maintain his influence over the direction of the Chinese Revolution. These meetings were often brief and carefully managed to minimize stress on him. His public appearances grew less frequent, and when he did appear, it was evident that he was physically weakened. Photographs and footage from this period show a visibly aged and frail Mao, a stark contrast to the vigorous leader of earlier years. In late 1975 and early 1976, his health took a turn for the worse. He suffered several significant medical episodes, including a heart attack and repeated respiratory complications. Each health crisis left him weaker and less able to communicate effectively. Despite these challenges, he remained mentally alert and continued to assert his political will through written notes and directives. His determination to shape the future of China never wavered, even as his body failed him. The months leading up to Mao's death were marked by intense political maneuvering within the Communist Party. The looming power vacuum created by his impending death led to a struggle between different factions, each vying for control of the party and the future direction of the country. Mao's designated successor, Hua Guofeng, was positioned to take over, but the radical Gang of Four, led by his wife Jiang Qing, sought to assert their influence. This internal power struggle added a layer of complexity to the already tense atmosphere surrounding his final days. On September 2, 1976, Mao suffered a severe heart attack, which significantly impaired his condition. Over the next week, his health continued to decline rapidly. Despite the efforts of his medical team, his respiratory and cardiac functions deteriorated. He slipped in and out of consciousness, and it became clear to those around him that the end was near. Throughout this period, top party officials, including Hua Guofeng and other members of the Politburo, remained close, monitoring the situation and preparing for the inevitable transition of power. Mao Zedong died on September 9, 1976, at the age of 82. His death marked the end of an era in Chinese history, bringing to a close the life of a leader who had profoundly shaped the course of the nation. The immediate response to his death was one of profound national mourning. The Chinese government announced his death to the public, and a period of official mourning was declared. Millions of Chinese citizens expressed their grief through public gatherings, memorial services, and personal tributes. The government organized an elaborate state funeral, reflecting Mao's status as the founding father of the People's Republic of China. His body was placed in the Great Hall of the People in Beijing, where it lay in state for a week, allowing thousands of people to pay their final respects. The sight of his body, draped in the red flag of the Communist Party, evoked strong emotions among the mourners, many of whom saw him as a symbol of China's revolutionary struggle and national rejuvenation. Following the period of public mourning, His body was embalmed and placed in a specially constructed mausoleum in Tiananmen Square, a location of immense symbolic significance in Chinese political history. The mausoleum, known as the Chairman Mao Memorial Hall, was completed in May 1977 and remains a major site of pilgrimage for Chinese citizens and international visitors. His preserved body lies in a crystal coffin, visible to the public, ensuring his continued presence in the heart of the nation. The death of Mao Zedong set the stage for a period of significant political and economic reform under his successors. Hua Guofeng initially took over the leadership, but it was Deng Xiaoping who eventually emerged as the paramount leader, steering China towards a path of market-oriented reforms and opening up to the global economy. The shift away from his revolutionary policies marked a new chapter in Chinese history, characterized by rapid economic growth and profound social change. Mao's legacy remains a complex and contested issue in China. While he is revered as a revolutionary hero and the founder of the People's Republic, his policies, particularly the Great Leap Forward and the Cultural Revolution, are also associated with significant suffering and upheaval. The official narrative in China acknowledges his contributions while also recognizing the excesses and mistakes of his later years. This nuanced view reflects the ongoing struggle to reconcile Mao's towering historical presence with the realities of his rule.